Hi everybody, welcome back to my craft room. This is the sewing video for my Pirate Jester cosplay from Critical Role. I made this cosplay to compete in the 2026 ALA Masquerade, and I have a video all about that already. I also have a video on how I made her giant spiritual weapon lollipop, and holy cow, it barely fits in frame. Back on the wall. I started this cosplay in October 2025 and finished it, no joke, December 31st of 2025. Which is crazy to think that I made all of this in 3 months. That is not my normal timeline for a build this intense. Also, you're gonna see my lights absolutely falling off the wall the entire video. I have fixed that now. Look at that. Lights. That doesn't matter. There are a lot of elements to this cosplay, so let's get into it. The first thing I'm making for Jester is my hoop skirt, which is very fun. I've never made a hoop skirt before. If you watched my Joanne haul video, I got this entire bolt of cotton, so that is what I'm gonna make the hoop skirt out of. Maybe I'm gonna jinx myself, but they seem really easy. It's kind of just a bunch of rectangles. And I am going to be making an open front hoop skirt, and luckily I went to the Sarah Spaceman University of watching her YouTube tutorial about how she made her open front hoop skirt, so I think I'm gonna be okay. I did get a bunch of steel hooping wire, so it's basically spring steel boning, but it just comes in like a big roll. Oh, it's kind of like rubberized. It feels like a garden hose. So this is what is gonna give it the strength to hold up all the petticoats and my skirt. The new season of Critical Role is literally starting in like 10 minutes, so I'm not gonna be talking to the camera very much. I started out by ironing a bunch of cotton and cutting out a rectangle for a waistband. I also cut out a matching rectangle of some iron-on interfacing to stiffen it. I bought a bunch of this interfacing on Black Friday and it kind of sucks, so I try to use it on pieces you don't see. I also thought I'd try my hand at drafting a nice little curved waistband. In the past, I usually take the shortcut of just doing a rectangle, which does work fine, but giving it a slight curve helps it sit on your back and hips a lot nicer. With the waistband ready, it's time to start on the hoops. There's math you can do if you're trying to make a specific hoop skirt with a specific flare, but this is a short, open front hoop skirt that didn't need to be all that huge. So I held up the wire and then cut it with some tin snips. I measured the piece of wire and then cut a 4-inch rectangle the same length as the piece of steel. I serged the edges of my rectangle and then put some gathering stitches on the side that is going to connect with my waistband so I could gather it down to fit. I sewed that gathered rectangle to the waistband and then added some buttons and buttonholes for my closure. I measured out another length of hooping wire and did the same thing with another rectangle of cotton. So cut out the fabric the length of the wire, gather down the top section, and then pin that gathered edge wrong sides together to my first skirt tier. I sewed it wrong sides together because after I pressed the seam down flat, I used some bias tape to make the channel for the wire to sit in and to hide all of those ugly edges. I made sure to do a little test of shoving the wire into the channel to make sure it all fit and worked okay. And I just kept repeating and making more rectangles down the length of the skirt. So crazy that people used to do these 100% by hand, and also full length ones. This one is only gonna hit me like mid-thigh, and it's a lot of work. It's not hard, it's just rectangles, but it's a lot of work. Initially, I was gonna have these button at the side, but it ended up being easier to just button it at the back. I have 1, 2, 3 full tiers, so 3 full hoops, and then I have sewn on a rectangle for another like halfway hoop, but I'm gonna put the steel in to kind of see how it's looking so far. In the back here, I've left the bias tape open so I can slide that in, and then I'm just gonna hand sew that closed. You can get connectors for the steel. I did not get any of those, so I'm gonna see how far I can get with some electrical tape. Here's my shortest bone. Ooh, so shapely. When I got the wire shoved into the channels, I took strips of electrical tape and wrapped it really tightly around the overlapped wire. Then I hand sewed the channels shut. This doesn't look amazing, but it's in the back and ended up being underneath a lot of skirt layers, so it's okay. The lower open tiers were a lot easier since I was able to just insert the steel and then fold the bias tape and hand sew it down. It's so cute, very cupcakey, maybe a little bit bigger of a silhouette than the reference image, but I think that the fabric from the skirts is gonna collapse the hoops down a little bit, and I also wanna make sure it's not like too flat. I can always make the bones a little bit shorter if I want to. So now, here's the thing with a hoop skirt. You have all of your steel in here, and underneath a satin skirt, which is what I'm planning on making the skirt out of, you can see the hoops really well, and it just doesn't look very clean or very nice to have exposed hoops. So to fix that, I have a bolt of tulle. This is tulle I got from Joann Fabrics before it closed. I think I have 16 yards of it, if I remember correctly. So this is what I'm gonna be using to make the petticoat to go above the hoop skirt, underneath the actual skirt. Guess what a petticoat is? If you said more rectangles, you're right, but these are big rectangles. I made another waistband out of cotton and then started cutting out long strips of tulle and gathering it down using my serger since it's much faster than hand gathering. If I remember right, I did 4 times the length of the waistband for the tulle for lots of volume and attached it to the waistband. And just like the hoop skirt, I did a button closure for the petticoat. So with that, I have the beginnings of my little petticoat here. I need the petticoat to be kind of a high-low situation, so I'm gonna keep the opening in the front. I have cut out, like you saw, a lot of piles of tulle. So I have some 8-inch sections and some 10-inch sections. My idea is to sew 4 panels together, and those are gonna be my layers, but I'm gonna cut them so they're like, whoop, so they're gonna be a little shorter on the sides. So then when I sew them to here, it's like, and then I'll sew ruffles to them. I think that's gonna work, and it should be plenty fluffy. Really, the only way to find out is to give it a try. I cut out approximately 4 billion rectangles of tulle and sewed them together into long strips. Then I cut them to be shorter on the front sections like I mentioned earlier and serged all of the edges. You don't really have to serge the edges of tulle. It's perfectly acceptable to have raw edges for this fabric, but I figured that I can, so why not? Then with my nightmare pile of tulle, I lined up 4 layers, 2 10-inch and 2 8-inch layers, and clipped them together at the top. This was yards and yards of tulle. My ruffling foot made quick-ish work of it though, but it took a long time. The petticoat was my biggest mental battle with this cosplay, and I will be happy if I never have to make a petticoat again. It's actually a pretty simple project as far as the steps. Cut out rectangles, gather rectangles, sew the rectangles to the other rectangles, repeat for eternity. Quick try on to check, and then I moved on to putting some satin ruffles on the petticoat. Jester has a very layered skirt with lots of ruffles, so I figured different satins lining the edges would look fun and not add to the bulk of the actual skirt. I made a 5-inch poster board template to make things go a little bit faster, and again, cut out yards and yards of strips of satin and sewed them together. After a nice press, I thought I could use my ruffling foot, but it did not play nice with the satin. It was way too slippery. So I did the scrunch the fabric under the presser foot method, which is not my favorite technique as far as looks go, but for a petticoat that's underneath a lot of stuff, sure. I alternated between tulle, shiny satin, and matte satin ruffles, just for some extra depth and dimension. And since I was ruffling, I added some leftover satin to the front of the hoop skirt. And also, to support all the layers and to eventually support the tail, I whipped up a very quick bum roll with an elastic waistband. Emily from the future here. I won't lie, I totally burned out on filming the rest of the petticoat because it's just ruffles forever, and it was not very fun. But the high-low of the hoop skirt was not high-lowing enough for me, so I added essentially a rectangle panel in the back just underneath the skirt, but that risks falling behind, so I have just some little press studs, snap, so it stays in place even when I'm twirling around. So that's what the end result ended up looking like. As I filmed this, this is technically not finished. I ran out of every inch of pink thread that I have in this craft room. I don't have any left, so it's in the mail. So that means I need to get started on the corset, which is by far going to be the most difficult construction process of this whole cosplay. So I've made a lot of corsets before. I've made a lot of corsets on this channel. There's a couple things that I have not done before. It's really important for me to get the cupped look in the corset. I think you could do a simple overbust corset, but because I'm doing this as a competition piece, I'm going for accuracy. And Jester's got some cups. Cups are notoriously difficult to fit. So I am starting with a pattern. This is a Corsets by Caroline waistcoat inspired corset pattern. I'm gonna be making a couple of adjustments. This pattern, oh, I had to do battle with Adobe Acrobat to get it to print. It was hell. I also had to get special paper because it is a pattern from the UK. So this is printed on A4 paper, which is like just a little bit taller than like regular America paper. So keep that in mind if you want to use this pattern. I've heard really good things about her pattern, so I am actually really excited to use it. I have the most gorgeous pink polyester dupioni that is gonna make a really lovely outer shell. But first, I gotta do a mock-up. So, step one is taping all of these pieces of paper together, which is the worst thing about a PDF pattern, but what are you gonna do? When you're making a corset, unfortunately, a mock-up is really important. Make sure you take your measurements correctly and also add seam allowance to the pattern if it doesn't come with it. So here you can see this goes up to look more like a waistcoat, as is the pattern. I want it to come to a center point. So this is where I'm gonna be doing like a pretty significant modification in the shape of the corset. I figure I'm just gonna do this right off the bat because I know what I want. This might be too deep of a V, but that is what a mock-up is for. I made my first mock-up with some of the cotton I have left from the hoop skirt and stiffened it with duck canvas. Cotillion is the most appropriate fabric for a corset, but I've honestly never had a problem with duck canvas, and it was going really well. The pattern for the corset itself was really simple. I installed a busk for the first time, and I even did okay installing the cups. But then I tried it on. I'm gonna preface this by saying you're allowed to laugh. What is this? We'll start with the good news. This part fits really quite nicely. It laces in the back. I need to take it in a little bit at the straps and on the side, but that makes sense. I got like a little, I don't have a lot of room in the shoulders. Something here has occurred. Something is nuts. This looks insane, which it's very funny. If I fold this down, if I make this part a little bit shorter, it looks much better. And I also think I need to take it in on the side right here, just a smidge. For a first mock-up, not that bad, minus the obvious problems. I can't stop laughing, it's so funny. I'm gonna try and print out a different size. I did try to unpick one of the cups and make some pattern adjustments to see if I could salvage this attempt. Okay, well, that second attempt didn't really work at all either, so what I have done is reprinted the pattern. I'm gonna recut out the first two panels, and I printed it in a smaller cup size, same body size, hopefully. Third time's a charm. Luckily, I don't have to redo the entire corset, just the front two panels, which, you know, is still gonna be a pain, but that's fine. This is what mock-ups are for. The instructions said like, hey, you're gonna probably have to make several mock-ups. Onto mock-up 1.5, I just hacked off the front two panels and harvested the busk. I still did have to unpick my seams, and who knows, it may have been faster to start from scratch than it was to unpick the boning channels. Probably not, but I was going through it. Mock-up number 2 with the replaced front. Still just like a little too loose, need to shorten the straps, but we're much closer. I think if I just take it, I gotta be careful. I think if I just take it and like make it a little smaller on the side here, I think we're gonna be golden. I marked on one cup the pattern adjustments to make and then sewed it back to the corset, and look at that, it was so much better. Then I was able to transfer those changes to some paper and have a fully custom fitted cup pattern. I also had to make a couple of tweaks on the corset body pattern to make sure everything would sew together properly. Then it was time for one more mock-up, just for safety. I got this yellow satin fabric by mistake, you'll see the pink version of it later, and I figured that making a corset mock-up out of pretty fabric would make me sew it more carefully, and I was right. I even harvested the underwire out of a bra that doesn't really fit me, and I got it for like $3 on clearance, so don't feel too bad for it. I have absolutely tornadoed the craft room doing this. Here it is, the second full mock-up 2.5 if you will. It fits so much better. I took in the sides, I took in the straps. I of course made the cups a lot smaller, but this is what I was going for. It still suffers from some mock-up For the final one, I'm gonna add a hook and eye. It's great because the back closes without a lacing gap, or at least it should. I got into this myself, so it's not pulled perfectly straight, but this fabric is horrible to sew. I'm glad I'm not making the actual corset out of it. The skirt should be a lot easier. So now it's time to move on to the actual corset. I'm using this really pretty polyester shantung I got from Mood. It's gorge. I feel like I really have a grasp on the order of operations and where I want to add stuff in and when. And hey, I can sew bust cups now. Jester in the art is very pushed up, and so I have also opted to make myself very pushed up. Someday I'd like to finish this and make it an actual wearable corset because the fabric is really so pretty, but I'm on a bit of a timeline, so I'm just gonna jump right into making the final, and that I will show you in a little bit more detail. It's time for real and serious corsetry. Step 1 was making sure my fabric was wrinkle-free, so cutting out the pattern would be as perfect as possible. And for a little extra strength on that fashion layer, I added some iron-on interfacing. I marked out my pattern pieces on my fabric and then cut them out. I have my seam allowance on my pattern pieces because I find it very annoying to do it after on the pattern pieces. This is a 2-layer corset. My fashion layer and stiffening layer of duck canvas, no lining. I don't feel the need to line my corsets pretty much ever. It adds bulk that I don't want at the seams. I started very first with the cups because I noticed that if I left the cups for last, I had a tendency to rush them, so I'm cutting out my bra foam first. A stiffer foam would have been better for this, but it's fine. For bra foam, you can cut out your pattern pieces without seam allowance. Then you butt those 2 pieces of foam up against each other and sew with a wide zigzag stitch so you catch both pieces of foam. Then I pieced together my shell and lining bra cup layers. These needed some top stitching, so I sewed very slowly so it stayed nice and neat. I pinked my edges to get as much bulk out of the seam as possible. You don't want bulky seams getting in the way of your nice cups. So we have shell, foam, and lining ready to sew together. But the cups need somewhere to go, so I'm going to prep the front panels for the cups. My first step was making some markings for where the cups would go. I marked 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 inch away from the seam. I carefully cut some notches along the edges of the curves and folded the edges down to meet that 1/4 inch line and ironed it super well. This gets rid of the raw edges. I also marked on my pattern where the top of the busk is going to sit, as well as marking the boning channels that don't sit along a panel seam. There is also a facing for the busk to add some strength and so you don't see the white duck canvas along the seam. This corset is the first one I've made that uses a busk, and I was afraid of them, but they're actually really easy. You just line up your busk where you want it, mark where you need the clips to poke through, and then sew a straight stitch down your front seam, but just pick up and cut your threads where those clips need to stick through. Then just poke the clips through the holes and use a zipper foot to sew along the edge of that busk to keep it there forever. The peg side I found to be a little trickier, but you mark your holes and use an awl to separate the fabric fibers so you can push that little peg up through the hole. It's important that you don't cut a hole for the busk since it can make your fabric more prone to ripping, and then same thing, zipper foot to keep it in place. From here, I sewed those center front panels to my side front panels, and the cups are ready to be inserted. The lining and shell of the cups first get sewn together and then pinked. The seams don't get pressed open, they get pressed facing away from the center of your body. I understitched that seam allowance at the top of the cups to keep it from getting weird and foldy. And look at that, a cup! A nice cup! And now the cups go on the corset. I lined up my drawn marks and sewed them really carefully on the folded edge of the corset, and they turned out so pretty. Doing them first while I still had a lot of patience in me was definitely the move. I sewed in boning channels, which is really boring. I'm not gonna make you watch that. Cups look great though. Super happy. The rest of sewing the corset was very straightforward. I pieced the seams together and then just sewed all of the boning channels. There are channels along all of the seams and then some more on the body of the corset to help with the strength of the garment. Time to get those raw edges on the top and bottom contained. And for that, I made my own bias tape by cutting out strips of my dupioni on the bias of the fabric and ironing it. I machine sewed it to the right side, but for the wrong side, it's hand sewn so there aren't any visible machine stitches. If you want to make a really nice corset, or really any kind of professional looking garment, learn to love hand sewing. You'll be doing a lot of it. Installing grommets is genuinely my least favorite part of sewing corsets. It sucks, but a handheld press makes it easier for me. And now Now to finish off the cups. I made a mistake and sprayed my foam with temporary basting spray, and this was not necessary and made it harder to get the fabric smooth, so don't do that. Then I placed the foam inside the cups and hand sewed it closed. Almost done with the base. I added in my boning, and I used plastic boning to keep everything light. Since there's so many boning channels, I didn't feel like I needed to worry that much about spring steel. I also sewed in a hook and eye, but I did change the placement of that later since it kind of pulled the cups weird where I put it. And after adding some bias binding to the bottom, the base corset is done. Oh, this is by far the hardest thing I've ever sewn in my entire life. It's still not 100% done. There's some decorations I need to add. I happened to get a lot of vintage lace trim from one of my parents' elderly neighbors who's going through a lot of her sewing stuff and getting rid of it. So I'm gonna use a lot of that. I have some ribbon lace in the mail, and then there's some leather detailing as well. So we'll get into it. Ooh, don't make a cupped corset unless you really want a challenge. Whoa! Also, I need to clean up in here. It's so bad. It's bad. More hand sewing. I just whip stitched this lace along the top edge of the whole corset. Now it's time for some sleeves. For a nice off-the-shoulder sleeve, you just take a regular sleeve pattern and cut the part that connects the shoulder off. It's that easy. You want it to still sew to the armpit nicely though. I cut the sleeves out on this beautiful beaded and sequin fabric I got from Etsy, and then, so I don't murder my machines, I cut the beads out of the seam allowance. I have seen people use a hammer to just smash them, but I want to reuse the beads. I serged around the edges of my whole sleeve piece to keep the edges nice and started planning out my lace placement. Before I could sew on the lace, I folded down the top and bottom edges of the sleeves to create a channel for some elastic. I sewed the channels with the lace along the top, and they looked so cute, flowy and sparkly. I hand sewed the sleeves to the corset because the thought of machine stitching and ruining my beautiful bias tape is unbearable. Time to add the elastic into the channels so the sleeves sit snug around my arms. I'm using clear swimsuit elastic so there aren't any weird lines on my arms when they're eventually blue. A safety pin was super helpful to feed the elastic through the channel. I think this is gonna be controversial, but Jester has paint smudges on her corset, so I too am putting paint smudges on the corset. I worked so hard, 40 hours, a full work week, on this beautiful, perfectly fitted corset to put acrylic paint on it. Well, yeah, I put off doing this for a long time, but I really love how it looks. Not only is it accurate to the art, but I feel like it pulls the cosplay into the real world, you know? As a design and character choice on my part, I put a few rhinestones on the corset to match the paint. She's a sparkly gal, so I feel like it just makes sense. It's time for the last detail of this corset, which is a leather strap closure on the front. This took me a long time to figure out how I wanted to do this. I started with these silver clasps that I bent the clip on so they can't separate. Then I took some 1 ounce veg tan leather and cut a 3/4 inch strip. I cut that strip into 4, gave my pieces a quick brown dye job, and then positioned my silver clasps on the leather and using invisible thread, hand stitched the clasps to the leather straps. Since there are so many open spots on the clasps, I didn't want to risk glue gooping everywhere and looking messy. I positioned my straps on the corset, and you may have noticed a hole in the straps, and I marked on the corset where that hole was. With my trusty awl, I poked a hole through that mark and used an easy rivet to attach one side of the straps to the corset. I wanted to be able to easily move the straps when I was putting on and taking off the corset, so I actually settled on magnets for this. I used some E6000 glue and small neodymium magnets since they stick to the metal busk, and once the glue was dry, the corset was 100% complete. Whoa, that is so bright. What is happening? I'm gonna start working on Jester's tights now. These, look, I hated them at first. I thought they looked really stupid and tacky outside of the design, but I have grown to really actually quite like them. And maybe that's because I'm gonna be using stretch velvet for them, and I love stretch velvet. Like so much of this cosplay, it's rectangles, and so I will be cutting strips of velvet using what you always see me cut strips of anything with, which is this 2-inch quilting ruler. Anytime I cut a strip of anything, it's probably 2 inches because it's easy. I know people don't like sewing stretch velvet, but I do. So that's good. I cut out my 2-inch strips of purple and teal velvet and lined them up. I made sure to check that the pile of velvet was all going the same direction because that's really easy to forget to do. Then I marked a 1/2-inch seam allowance on all of my pieces because I used my serger to sew the strips together. Sergers are great for stretch velvet especially. I like using a combination of sewing clips and pins to keep the fabric from shifting. And look at all those perfect stripes! I just made one long striped panel so I could cut it in half and use 1/2 for each leg. Then I closed up those panels to make 2 tubes. Here are my striped little tights, they turned out so cute. I do have blue tights that I could like sew these to because the top of these, it's gonna get covered by bloomers. You're not gonna see it. But I kind of want it to be a little sturdier. So these are some old swim shorts. I don't really wear swimming and they kind of match the velvet. So I'm just gonna sew these to the spandex shorts. Could I make the spandex shorts? Yeah, but here's my thought. I can't make tights, so, and these would be like pre-made anyway, so I don't know. I'm just gonna sew them to something I already have, save a little bit of time. You're not gonna see it. It's like a structure layer, so I feel okay about just using these. I got the stretch velvet sewn to my spandex shorts using a zigzag stitch. You're not gonna be able to see my face. Quick try on with the petticoat. Super cute. I'm really glad I did the spandex shorts. I think they're gonna be a little sturdier than tights. I don't think the skirt is gonna be hard, but I don't want to do it. Good news, bad news, sandwich. Good news, I love the fabric I got. This is the pink version of the yellow fabric I accidentally got sent. It's so shiny, it's so drapey, but not like shiny in like a cheap, tacky way. It's perfect. Bad news, I have to make more ruffles for the hem and I don't want to do it. Good news, I think I'm gonna be using a circle skirt pattern or a variation on the circle skirt pattern, which is great because I'm a very experienced circle skirtist, but I will have to do some measuring and some math. I put the petticoat on to take some measurements for my body and started with the waistband. This was the 3rd time making a waistband for this project. And did I bother to save the pattern from either of the 2 times before? No. I've just been doing these from measurements, which is not efficient at all. I'm going to be using a 3/4 high-low circle skirt pattern, so I whipped up a mini version just so I could better picture how the larger pattern needed to look. There are tons of circle skirt calculators on the internet, and I use one every time I need to make a circle skirt. You may be wondering, Emily, why are you wearing this lovely ball gown in the middle of your Jester YouTube video? Well, I made this dress for 2020 for a formal event, and I never got to go. I did wear it out once, and it is very beautiful, but it has just kind of been sitting in my closet for like 6 years. The problem, well, one of the many problems with Jester's skirt is I need to put another ruffle on it, and this fabric is so light and delicate that I don't want to put the ruffle on this because I fear that this will just get weighed down and warp and stretch because it's a circle skirt and it's gonna get cut on the bias. But you know who made this dress with a full circle skirt of pink satin, light pink satin? So we're gonna say goodbye, so I'm gonna unpick this and use the fabric for something else. This is also made out of leftover wedding dress fabric. The wedding dress fabric is just the gift that keeps on giving. Yeah, this is a full-length circle skirt. There's a ton of fabric in here. And why buy more fabric when fabric rotting in closet? Rest in peace, dress, but look at how much fabric. I laid out my skirt pattern and cut it out of the pink satin, and I cut out the same pattern from my floral satin. And then another long rectangle for a ruffle out of the last of my Joanne Fabrics Casa Collection matte satin. I miss it so much. Circle skirt hemlines are really long because circumferences and such, so I had to make a ton of ruffle to pin and sew onto the hem. Then I attached my skirt pieces together at the waistband. I have the over circle skirt sewn. It looks very cute. I love this fabric. Luckily, I bought a lot of it just in case I mess up. Got a ruffled lining and the overskirt. Normally, I don't really line skirts because it doesn't need it. However, Jester has this very soft, kind of flipped under hem. So I'm gonna do kind of a bubble hem. And I'm going to interrupt myself here because I did do the bubble hem and ruched the sides, and look at that, it looks awful. I needed to do a corseted try on because I really wasn't sure if I liked it or not. And I I'm on the fence. Went and got dinner and thought about it, and I have decided to remake it. Mainly what I'm doing is I'm just going to make the skirt longer, and I'm gonna ditch the like gathering in the front part. I think that just ended up looking weird. So just longer skirt so I have more space to just like pull it up and play around with like tacking it down. So there it is. It's about 10 inches longer on the bottom and 6 inches longer on the top. I cut out my new skirt pieces and hung them so they would warp, and also steamed them because I found the satin really does not like to be ironed. And once the skirts had hung for a day or two, I hand hemmed the entire skirt with an invisible hemming stitch. I really like hand sewing, so this was maybe my favorite part of making the skirt. I did iron the hem on a really low heat with a linen scrap to crisp it up. So here we are, the hem is finished on the new skirt, and it's perfect, if I do say so myself. You'll notice, you can't even see it, it's not in frame. You'll see the skirt is a bit longer, and that's because I had an idea on how to use both of the skirts that I have made. So underneath this skirt, we have the circle skirt with the ruffle still on it. I did unpick it and get rid of the weird like ruching up here. I hated it. But now I can leave this and conceal the edge of the ruffle because it's ugly and have this kind of weight. But one of the strengths of this satin is it's so lightweight and so flowy, I didn't want to like hinder that. So now what I'll do is attach these two at the waistband, they're not attached yet, and then I can put on the corset and sort of hand do up the skirt to give it that nice flowy look, and then expose this ruffle. Took a while for us to get here, but I am glad we're here. I was finally able to get all of these skirt levels and waistbands sewn together, and the end result definitely looked silly before I bustled up that top layer. And all I had to do to bustle it was grab sections of the skirt, pull them up to the waistband, pin them in place, and sew. And this is the last thing for this video. I made an extremely simple pair of bloomers out of some striped stretch satin. Bloomers always look hilarious before you sew in the elastic. And even though I haven't shown you every single part of how I made this cosplay, I still want to put in some reveal shots. Because I can. It's my video. And that concludes part 1 of my Jester cosplay build. In the next video, I'm gonna cover more of the accessories and how I turned myself into a little blue tiefling. So if you want to see more of my Jester cosplay and how I made it, make sure you subscribe for part 2. And again, I have my ALA vlog and also the spiritual weapon video already up on my channel that you can check out if you haven't already. If you want to see what I'm working on right now, you can find me on Instagram and I'm also on TikTok. And with that, I'll see you next time. Bye!